This is why you should never lick envelopes unless you want, well, you'll see. A woman in California who worked at the postal office dealt with tons of envelopes. Now, normally she used a wet sponge to wet them, but she ran out of the water, so she decided to lick a couple envelopes to get them closed. In the process of licking it, she ended up cutting her tongue. She didn't think anything of it until about a week later when she noticed a huge lump forming on the side of her tongue. The doctor took a look at it and said, "We need to do surgery and get this thing out of here." The doctor started to incise the lesion out, but then he noticed something crazy. Out from the hole came a live cockroach. It turns out that the envelope had cockroach eggs on it, and when she cut her tongue, the eggs went into her tongue and started forming into live cockroaches. I don't know about you, but I'm never looking envelopes again.
This is why you should always trust your parents. In 1990, a father and his 15-year-old son worked together at a gas station in Florida. One night, the boy was sitting outside on a break when he saw a crazy-looking woman walking towards the store. They were in a high-crime area and it was very late, so the boy turns around to look through the glass at his dad to see what he should do. His dad took one look at the woman and just shook his head, no, do not help her. The woman walks up to the boy and says, "Hey, my car's broken down, can you give me a ride?" Before the boy can answer, his dad bursts outside and says, "You need to leave here immediately." Angrily, the woman turns and leaves, cussing them both out the whole way. 1 year later, the boy's in his room at home when his dad calls from the other room and says, "You gotta come in here and look at the TV." On the screen was the same woman from the gas station. Better known as Eileen Wuornos, she was a serial killer who used to pick up her male victims at gas stations in Florida. She was later put to death. This is why you should always sleep with your lights on. In 1991, a man named Christopher Case was found dead in his bathtub, fully clothed in the fetal position. When police interviewed his best friend Sammy, she told them about a very disturbing phone call she got from him the night before he died. On the call, he told her that the previous night he had woken up to what sounded like whispering coming from underneath his bed. When he went to look, he couldn't move. As he laid helplessly, he watched a black figure pull itself out from underneath his bed. Once it was fully upright, it reached down and began choking him until he passed out. The next morning when he came to, he felt his neck and it was swollen and bruised. And then he saw blood on his hands and he saw that there were deep, uniform incisions on each of his fingertips. As he's saying all this to Sammy and telling her how scared he is to go to bed that night, he suddenly stops and he says, "I hear whispering outside my room." Then the phone went dead. This is why you never judge a book by its cover. On the evening of August 7th, 1985, police received a call about a mentally ill woman attacking her family with a gun. When police arrived at her residence, they didn't hear any shooting or hear any noises coming from inside the house. Police tried yelling for the shooter to come outside, but when she didn't listen, they went in. Inside was a massacre. All 5 family members have been killed, including 2 young children. One of the deceased was Sheila Bamber, the mentally ill woman the police have been called about, and she was holding a rifle that was tucked up against her neck with a gunshot wound underneath her chin. This case gained massive media attention, putting pressure on the police to solve it as quickly as possible, and so they jumped to the conclusion that this had to be a murder-suicide perpetrated by Sheila. But one detective felt like they were missing something and kept investigating. And sure enough, he found something hidden under the stairs. This is why you should always keep your head on a swivel. In 2017, an elderly woman who lived alone thought she saw something moving in her backyard and went to the window to have a look. As she's looking around, a shadowy figure emerges right on the other side of the glass, standing in her backyard. Terrified, she keeps an eye on the figure while calling police, but by the time she hangs up, the figure's gone. When the police arrive, her front door is unlocked, so they go inside and they find her still sitting in front of the window looking for this figure. The police search the backyard, but they don't find anything. When the police go back inside to search the house, they quickly find some large footprints that couldn't have been hers in the room that she was sitting in and all around the first floor. That's when they realized what was going on. She wasn't seeing a shadowy figure in her backyard. She was seeing the reflection of someone in the room with her.
In high school, I had a friend who lived in this old, small apartment building. And on the first floor was this old guy named Dave who had apparently lived in the building forever. And no one really knew what Dave's deal was. The only time people saw him is when he walked outside to walk his tiny dog. But other than that, he never left his apartment. He had a nephew who delivered him groceries once a week. My friend just assumed that Dave was too old or had some sort of sickness that prevented him from leaving the house. One day my friend was coming home from school and Dave's nephew was leaving the apartment building. And my friend is really sweet, so she was like, "Hey, I know Dave sometimes has troubles getting out of the house, so if you ever need me to go over there and bring him something, let me know. I'm always happy to help." And the nephew looked really shocked and terrified. He was like, "No, you should never go over to Dave's ever. And then he got really awkward and he was like, okay, gotta go, bye. And then a few weeks later, my friend was coming home from a Halloween party late at night. And when she got inside her apartment building, Dave's door on the first floor was wide open and it was pitch black inside his apartment. But then she heard something behind her. So my friend hears something behind her, but it's pitch black. She's like, hello? And then she finds the switch to the hallway lights, turns them on, and Dave is standing right there with his small dog. She's like, hey Dave, you kind of scared me. And Dave was like, oh, sorry, I was looking for the light switch myself. But that didn't make any sense because he wasn't standing anywhere close to the switch and he had been living in that apartment building for 30 years. So she starts walking up the stairs and then Dave says, I've been working on a project that I'm really excited to show you. And my friend's like, oh, like an art project? And Dave's like, yeah, kinda. And she's like, okay, well maybe my mom and I can come by another time to see it. And then they say goodnight, but she just feels pretty weird about the whole interaction. A few months later, she's at school and she gets a text from her mom that she has to work late and won't be home to make dinner. That afternoon, my friend walks home, walks up the stairs to her apartment building, goes to unlock the door, but then realizes the door's already unlocked. Sometimes her mom would forget to lock the door, so it wasn't totally out of the ordinary, but it was winter and it was already getting dark outside even though it was only 4 p.m., so she turns on all the lights to her apartment. But then, all of a sudden, all the lights switch off. She tries to switch all the lights back on, but they're not working anymore. And all of a sudden, she's finding it really hard to breathe. She's afraid she might faint, so she kneels down onto the floor. Then suddenly, she feels sharp nails running down her back. And she tries to move, but she feels so weak that she can't. She turns around to see who it is, but before she can, she blacks out. The next thing she remembers is waking up in a hospital bed, and her mom is sitting next to her looking really worried. Her mom's like, everything's okay, there was a carbon monoxide leak in the apartment, and you passed out. The nurse is like, in the next few weeks, you may feel tired or sluggish or have hallucinations. Don't worry, that's totally normal. And my friend is like, what about the back scratches? Her mom's like, what are you talking about? So she runs to the bathroom, pulls up her hospital gown, and there are 4 dark scratches on her back. When she comes back from the bathroom, her mom looks concerned and she goes, honey, there's also something else you should know. Dave, who lived on the first floor, passed away, and they've been cleaning out his apartment and they found something. And it might freak you out, but I feel like you should know about it.
It's what she finds in the kitchen that's really scary. In the early 90s, a young girl was sleeping in her mom's bed when she suddenly woke up for no reason. She looked at her door and she saw her very affectionate cat kind of meowing down the hall as if someone was coming up to pet it, but she was next to her mom and they were the only ones in the house. The girl shakes her mom awake and points to the cat just as a man is walking past the door and disappears into the room across the hall. Before the man could come back out and find them, they both jump out the window, run across the street, and call the police. When the police arrive, the guy is nowhere to be found, but they do discover that the front door was unlocked, so that had to be the way he got in and out. But the mother swears up and down that she locked that door before she went to bed. A week later, the mother's cleaning their kitchen and she opens up the water heater closet where she finds this notebook that inside is their names and pictures of them in it, along with a pair of surgical gloves. Which means someone had snuck in at some point, was living in that closet spying on them, and then walking around their house at night.
So my friend's coworker went on a Tinder date with a guy and it went super well and they went on 3 more dates. And after the 3rd date, he asked her to come over so he could cook for her and she was super excited. And so she went to his house and he cooked her dinner and the date went great. But after she ate, she started to feel really sick. And she said, where's your bathroom? And he ran to the bathroom and he said, you can't come in here. It's very dirty. I have to clean it before you come in here. And he was in there a really long time. And she ended up shitting her pants. And he came out of the bathroom and he said, did you shit your pants? And she said, yes, I shit my pants. And so he was so understanding and he said, it's okay, take a shower. Give me your laundry, I will do your laundry. Give me your dirty clothes. So she did, she rolled them up, she gave him her dirty pants. And she got in the shower and she took a shower and he knocked on the door to check on her after her shower. And she opened the door to say thank you. And he was standing there covered head to toe, naked with her shit smeared on him.
This is what they meant when they said, don't talk to strangers. In the early 1900s, a 10-year-old boy was playing in the woods when a tall man appeared and asked if he wanted to come back to his cabin for dinner. Totally caught off guard, the boy reluctantly agrees and begins walking. When they get to the cabin, the boy is relieved when he sees Paul, a family friend, sitting on the porch, so the boy happily goes inside. After they eat, the boy says thank you to the strange tall man, says bye to Paul, and then he leaves. He had only walked a few steps when he sees his family, along with Paul, running up the path towards him, frantically asking if he was okay. Confused, the boy says, I'm just fine, and he looks at Paul and he's like, why didn't you tell them I was with you at the cabin? And he points over his shoulder. Paul glances over the boy's shoulder and then narrows his eyes and says, you were kidnapped by a cult 3 days ago. No one's seen you. Terrified, the boy turns around to look at the cabin he just came from, and it's gone. All he sees is a dark forest that stretches for miles.
Story time about the girl who was absolutely obsessed with me in high school. So it was my junior year in high school, and I'm just going to tell you guys the first story of how I knew that she was absolutely obsessed with me and wanted to be me. Well, I had been dating this guy for like a month, and I sent him nudes. Well, my nudes got spread around the school. And everybody knew they were mine until this one girl, and we're gonna call her Addie, started saying that they were hers. I guess one of my friends was talking about it in class and they were like, OMG, did you hear that her nudes got leaked? AKA mine. And Addie was sitting at the same table and she said, no, those are my nudes. And at first I thought this girl was just trying to be nice. I was like, oh, well, that's nice of her, you know. Like, maybe she's just trying to say that so that way nobody will bully me, I guess. Well, the one day I texted her about it. And I was like, hey, like, you don't have to do that. It's fine. I'll take responsibility for it. I did it. And she was like, what are you talking about? Those are my nudes. Like for part 2. Part 2 about the girl who was obsessed with me. So like I said, she basically told me that those were her nudes, even though I took the pictures and I knew they were mine. But I was like, okay, whatever, I'm not gonna argue with her. Well, then I get a text from my boyfriend, and he goes, what the fuck, you're so weird. Why would you send me somebody else's nudes? And I'm just sitting there like, what the fuck? And I tried to explain to him that I had no fucking clue why this girl was saying they were hers. But then he said that I was weird as fuck and he broke up with me. So like a week later, I see them walking around school together. And my friends tell me that they're now dating. And I really wasn't that mad about it. I was like, okay, maybe that's the only way that she could think of to get a boyfriend. Well, I forgot that my Instagram was logged in on his phone because he had super bad trust issues and wanted to make sure I wasn't cheating on him. So I text him and I'm like, hey, can you take my Instagram off your phone? And I saw that he read my text message, but I got no response. Well, a week later, you guys are never gonna guess what fucking happened, like for part 3. Part 3 about the girl who was obsessed with me. So like I said, I texted him and I got no response back. So I run into him the next day at school. And I'm like, hey, did you get my text? And he's like, text about what? And I was like, taking my Instagram off your phone? And he was like, oh yeah, Addie did it, don't worry. And I didn't think anything of it because, you know, I'm like, oh well, she's done torturing me. Well, I was very wrong. So in my first period, I went to go sit with my group of friends, because all 3 of us had that class together. And when I walk in, I realize that Addie is sitting in my seat. So I pull up a chair to the table, and they were all ignoring me and texting each other right next to me. So I was like, okay, what's wrong? And one of my friends goes, oh, nothing, just the fact that you DM'd Gigi and I's boyfriends, saying that we were whores and that they should date you. By the way, Gigi was my other friend. And after that, this bitch Addie has the nerve to make the comment, that's really fucked up. Why would you do that? So then I beat her ass and lost all my friends.